start to your day this morning here at PAKCon, and you're excited now to listen to our conversation about talent, and more specifically, how to build and scale high-performing companies. Next slide. Founder mode. I want to start talking about founder mode in this conversation, and I assume many of you here are sort of following kind of the startup news, so probably a lot of you have heard about this before, but for those who haven't, I will give a brief introduction what founder mode is. So founder mode is the title of a blog post that I've pasted here, a blog post written by Paul Graham, who's pictured here. Paul Graham is the founder of Y Combinator, which is probably the most successful and prominent startup incubator and accelerator based in San Francisco. And Paul Graham publishes this blog, published it for many years. It's probably kind of the startup Bible. And he published a post very recently called Founder Mode, about 3 weeks ago, and that kind of went viral. And the core sort of thesis of this blog post is that he says that there's something kind of a specific management style that he calls founder mode, which is different from manager mode, which is what a lot of us or like people are taught in management school. And he kind of introduces it because he attended a conversation with Brian Chesky, the founder and CEO of Airbnb, at a Y Combinator event, who talked about basically some of the themes that he describes here. And the core thesis is that a lot of people, and like specifically founders, are taught to kind of adopt a certain management style as they scale a company, to particularly hire professional managers into the business and kind of let them do their thing. So kind of get out of the way, hire smart people, and then kind of give them freedom to execute and build the company. And what Paul Graham and what Brian Chesky sort of says in this talk is like, every time he's done that, he felt like it actually went disastrously wrong, because he felt that things didn't go the way they did, and so he ended up always kind of getting more involved. And because it was so puzzling to him that all these advisors and investors were always telling him, you need to kind of run the company in a certain management style, he started kind of looking into this and started kind of reading about Steve Jobs' leadership style. And he mentioned kind of what he found interesting is that he's seen this more and more across other founders, is that they have kind of a unique and distinct management style. And one of the key attributes of this, and we'll talk about a few more things, is that this manager mode is this idea that you hire good people and then you don't get too much involved into them running their functions. You don't skip levels, but you kind of take a step back. And I found this really interesting, and many others have, and that's why I think it went viral, and that's why I want to talk about it in a little bit more detail today. Next slide, please. So you might ask yourself, why are we talking about founder mode in the Management Hive? We're here in the Management Hive. It's, and also maybe, I have not introduced myself, but I will shortly. I am not a founder, so yeah, I guess this is kind of why I find this question very interesting. Why I want to talk about it is because I've worked with corporate managers at BCG, advising C-level, building corporate ventures, but I've also worked very closely with VC-led and founder-led companies. At Vey, previously also a Project A portfolio company, where I helped the company scale from Series A to Series B over the last sort of 3 to 4 years. And then since last year, I've worked at Flix, where I'm now building up the newest venture with, I would say, the biggest potential, FlixTrain. And so both of these companies are obviously led by very sort of, I would say, visionary founders, Andre and also Thomas from Vey. And then I also, on the side, I invest into founder-led companies as an angel investor and support founders at the early stage. These companies are now at kind of seed and Series A, but they will at some point also go through that scaling phase. And next slide. So a second reason why I think this topic is interesting for also the management hive is that when you kind of look at companies and compare founder-led companies to other companies, you see that they significantly outperform in stock returns. So this is a study from 2014 by Bain, which shows that over kind of a 25-year time span, founder-led companies in the S&P 500 kind of grew 2.5 times more than other companies. And this is an old study, but I think there's no question that this still holds true today with some of the companies that we see in the have appreciated the most in market value over the last 10 years. And so the question that I want to ask here and that I've sort of thought about when I first read Founder Mode on the next slide is when you look at some of these successful founders, Jensen Huang from NVIDIA or Brian Chesky from Airbnb, and here Robert Gens, also they're good, very good German founders here from Zalando. What can we learn from successful founders about building and scaling high-performing companies? What are maybe some of these aspects that we should integrate into this manager mode traditionally? And then also for many people here who are not founders or on the next slide, I have a question, which is, how can you use this knowledge about how founder-led companies that are successful are being run to be yourself successful in this environment? Because there are specific, it's a different culture, it's a different management style, and I think it really helps to be aware of that. So there are kind of three things that I find really interesting about Founder Mode that I do think translates beyond just the individual founder for building and scaling high-performing companies, and that I have sort of reflected on over time. And the first one on the next slide is that this, what really sets, some of these great founder-led companies apart is that they have a very strong vision and mission. And this kind of comes from founders. They have a sharp sense of purpose of what they're building, where they want to get to, that they thrive on and get through all the highs and lows. And I oftentimes remind myself, because I've seen that a lot of the most kind of ambitious people, a lot of the people that will go above and beyond for your team and for your company, they also really thrive on mission, and they really want to be part of something meaningful. So when I hire people, but also kind of when I motivate my team, when we're in offsites, we spend a lot of time thinking about this. How does what we do as a team or as a company translate into the long-term vision where we want to get to? And because most people, I think they don't just show up to work to collect a paycheck, but they really want to achieve something greater than themselves. And this is actually interesting. There's also an interesting blog post by Sam Altman, who used to run Y Combinator for a time. Now everyone knows him as CEO of OpenAI. He published a blog post that says one of the most counterintuitive things about startups is that oftentimes the hardest startups are actually easier to build than the easy ones. And kind of the premise of that article is that when you try to achieve something really challenging, like whether it's technically challenging or it's a difficult market, you can get people on board much easier than if you're trying to build something trivial. And I think that's something I often think about. And now at Flix, when I built my team, is kind of that vision that we want to get to, and how important it is that we get there. Related to this, this is the next point, is what I've sort of observed about, and you can see this, I think, similarly in a lot of these larger founder-led companies, is that startups, but also other companies that manage this really well, and this is on the next slide, are kind of like a cult. They're like a movement. They're like people who really believe in something that maybe goes against the grain, that seems a bit crazy at the beginning, but they're sort of in this together. And at the core of this is this sense of purpose that unites them. But there's more aspects and layers to this. And this is also what I think about when I try to think about how to build the company as a whole, is that there's not just that purpose, but then there's principles and values around that. I think a lot of the very famous companies are also known for their values. And here there's an image of the Netflix culture memo, which has become very famous, also kind of a management book. where they talk about how to build high-performing teams, or things such as people over process, or I have a friend sitting here in the audience from Tesla, and I think Tesla is also very much known for their, hardcore values and principles. So this is something that I think also makes these founder-led companies quite unique, and obviously other companies have that as well, but I think it is very strong in these founder-led companies. Then the third one is when you want to build up this movement, it's also important to have some sort of a rhythm to the business, some kind of rituals and unique ways of working that make your company special, and to really think through that. And one way are things such as OKRs, or the way you plan, you do your annual planning, to introduce some specific type of rhythm, or a way you organize your offsites or your all hands, or you have a Thursday beers event that is special and unique. And this is kind of how you can also, I think, get the team together and really build something great and meaningful. And then the last one, this is kind of just underlining this kind of cult idea that a lot of the very successful companies, people also often dress the same. So they wear their company swag, they show up in their company hoodies. And I think that just shows that people want to kind of unite and get together. A second thing that I have observed in a lot of successful founder-led companies, and this is, I think, true anywhere, but there's something specific about it in founder-led companies, and this is on the next slide, is that good founders build a strong and trusting leadership team, and the leadership team, changes, of course. People are hired, and people sometimes leave. But one thing that some companies do consistently well, and I think this is a core contributor to their success, is that they have this inner circle of people who are really trusted, that the founders and the management really trust, because they are people who have learned how founders or management make decisions, and they're fully bought into that long-term vision, fully long-term incentivized. And that's also something I think about a lot as I build my team, is like, who do I want to hire to kind of, replace me as I kind of take on additional responsibilities, and who are these people that I think are really going in it for the long run and will really learn how to make good decisions, so I don't have to be as involved on a day-to-day basis. And there's two examples that I've just highlighted here. Flix actually also is very good at this. There's a bunch of very senior leaders at Flix who've been with the company for 10 years and really grown to take C-level roles, and are now kind of Andre and Daniel's close, leadership circle. There's the Amazon S team, the senior leadership team. When you click next, and then there's this Amazon leadership team has the function to upkeep the guiding principles of the company, and especially the mission to be the most customer-centric company on the planet, and say what you want about Amazon. It's obviously a very impressive company. And the second one that I wanted to show here, also because we're at PAKCon, is Trade Republic, Project A portfolio company. There was an article a couple months ago on Sifted about the Trade Republic power players. And it shows, if you click next, the 10 key people who make important decisions around the founders at Trade Republic. And it talks about how they're carefully selected, have grown with the company over time, many of them, not all probably, but a large majority. And based on everything I've heard about the Trade Republic universe, is that this is really the group of people that the founders, and particularly the CEO, trusts with making decisions, even though he makes a lot of decisions himself. And so this is just something I would take away, is like to be really thoughtful about long-term building your team, and growing and developing the people, and really trusting them also over time to grow with you in the company. And then a third point that I have observed, what I kind of want to take away myself as I build and scale high-performing companies, is founders, obviously, they're different because they've birthed the company, so they have some sort of initial right to be, an owner, because they're the largest shareholder, and but it doesn't mean that like employees shouldn't think about being an owner of the company. And what I mean by that is that it's important, even if you have your specific function, to think about the broader picture of the company and really still stay obsessed with the customer, be close to the customer, and not be too siloed or bogged up in these internal politics. And I think that makes sort of these high-performing companies really successful, is that people take ownership, take responsibility. They don't just kind of fulfill what's in their job description, but go above and beyond that. And that's also what I expect of my team. And there's this this balance or this tension that I'm sure we're also going to discuss later in the panel of founder mode to this micromanager mode of getting too involved in the day-to-day running and details of the company. And I think this is an important thing to keep in mind, that managers should not be involved in everything, and that's why you hire a team, to let them do things, but to really know when you are needed and when your decision and your your vision for the product is needed. And that's kind of the core distinction between micromanagement mode and also losing your team, if you're too involved in all the details all the time. Before we wrap up, I want to, of course, add a few notes about what's different when you're not the founder, because there are some differences, and they do affect, whatever this founder mode will be defined as in long term. I don't think there's like a definition at this moment, but that do make maybe manager mode inherently different from founder mode. Is that the first one is that you first have to gain the founder's trust. Like you're not, you have to also work your way into the company and being trusted and keeping that trust. And I think that's even more important in founder-led companies versus other kind of management-run companies, because in management-run companies there's politics. People get, like the CEO might not be the same CEO in 2 years. This also happens in founder-led companies, but it is rarer, because a lot of the times the good founders grow the business. And the second point is that you are not your company. For founders, that's a different thing. You are you're the first people who started it, and so that's something to, of course, keep in mind. That affects, like, you should not be as probably as invested as the founder, and it sometimes may make you think that you're less long-term incentivized or inclined to think long-term, which I think is probably not the recommendation I would have. But of course, you're also kind of trying to optimize your own career progression within the whole company. And then the last point that's also really important to mention is that a lot of these founder-led companies are, we're known, it's not always easy to work with the founders, and it's, founder mode, the idea is not that everyone should adopt their leadership style. I think more to the contrary. People, whenever you're hired to run and help scale a company, you are also hired to complement the founders and their skills and their leadership style. So it's important to keep developing that and also listening to your own intuition about this. And you within your team don't need to 100% adopt everything that the company kind of sees as the culture. And I think that's just something very important to keep in mind, is that you don't need to really imitate the founder, because that's not really the role. So just before we go into the panel, I wanted to sum up the 3 points that I kind of take away from founder mode as being important for building and scaling high-performing companies. First one that I mentioned is that the vision is really key, and this is something that will make sure that you yourself are motivated to go through all the highs and lows that you will have with a team building a large company. The second one is that you should think about who will be the people you will work closely with and who will become part of your inner circle in the company. And that will make sure that you have a fun time, because you select people really carefully and don't make too many compromises. And then the third one, as I mentioned, is that it's important to think like a real owner of the company and not get siloed into your own function. And the last point I want to make, and maybe also this will be discussed again in our panel later on, is that I think part of the response to this blog post article called Founder Mode was that people were scared, oh no, this now gives an excuse to founders, or even maybe to managers, to micromanage, not obey hierarchies. And that's definitely not the point. I think there's a lot of nuances and ways of communicating and handling this to be involved in some of the important details, but not to become kind of a bad manager. Yeah, and finally, I think what's cool about like this idea of founder mode, and when you look at some of the successful founders, when we go to the last slide, is that it's actually, I think I've always found it very fun, and I can't really imagine myself not working in founder-led companies because like there's inherent risk in these like fast-scaling companies and startups, early-stage startups. But if you work with the right team, if you work on something that's meaningful, and if you really, care about the product and feel that you can see your impact on it, then like these kind of highs and lows and crazy waters that we see here, they really make it worth it because you have just a fun time and you grow and learn a lot. So that's the introduction to our company building panel, and I'm really excited to hear Stefan and Martin's perspective on some of the points that we discussed.